Good evening, friends. Welcome. Good evening. Good evening. Wonderful. It's good to be back here again on this Tuesday evening as we come together for Beyond the Pain live video. Good evening. Welcome. 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 Thank God for how He has brought us so far. 1 week already in August. We give thanks to God and we're grateful for His faithfulness, for keeping watch over us through the thick and the thin of life. Here we are again. Another week has passed. And by the grace of God, today we'll continue from the topic we started last week, Tuesday, and talking about how powerful our stories are. Your story matters, your story of what happened to you. I don't know, there's this song that we used to sing when we were in the Sunday school. I'm not even sure of the exact lyrics, but there's if a line in the song that I've been ruminating over. It says that we will tell our story, how we overcome. We will understand it better by and by. By and by, when the saints are gathered in, I think that's the line. But we will all tell our stories of how we overcame, and we will understand it better by and by. Last week, I shared with us that our story matters. Your story matters. And you are the only one who can tell your story because your story is unique to you. Your, even if 10 people suffer from the same experience, you yours is still unique to you. Good evening. Welcome. Yours is still unique to you because no other person has the same constitution like you do. No other person has um, the same emotions about the situation like you do. Your story is unique to you because you have your unique personal perspective. You have your own, it's like your fingerprints. That is how unique your story is to you. And that is why each of us must tell our own story. And I was alluding to the fact that, stories engage the heart and stories connect us. We communicate a lot with stories, and every single one of us have a story to tell of what happened to us, what we experienced. And when we tell our stories in a healthy way, it can also bring hope to others. I shared a quote with us that says, one day you will tell the story of how you overcome what you're going through now, and it will become a part of someone's survival guide. And I really want to emphasize and echo on this because I believe that what happened to me is not just about me alone. And that was one of the things that informed the writing of my book, Grace in the Storms, because I believed in that scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 2 to 3, that says that the Lord comforts us in all our afflictions. With the same comfort, we will comfort others. There are others down the road who can benefit from how we processed our own experiences. What lessons did we learn that can benefit others? What are the pitfalls that others can glean from and avoid even in their own situation? But more importantly, also, telling our stories can be a useful and powerful tool for our emotional healing. And that's where I am going to take off from, from today's conversation. I'm going to be sharing with us. And like I did mention last week, Tuesday, I mean, we come here every Tuesday evening to talk about how we go beyond our painful experiences. I am Irene Titilola Olumese. I'm a trauma transformational coach. I help people to transform their pain to power, to purpose, and to profit. And this is one of the ways that we do so by coming here to to chat with us and encourage us that what happened to us need not be the final chapter of the story of our lives. And it can be just the preface to many more chapters of positive, of meaningful, making meaningful difference for others. So by the grace of God, I do not know how many people have had the opportunity to read Grace in the Storms. I can't tell the exact number. But one thing that I know is that this book has been an opportunity for others to hold on to hope in their own times of adversity. It has become somebody's survival guide. I guess on this side of the divide, I will never know how many people have, been encouraged and inspired to hold fast to hope in their own journey of life. And one of the things that I want to share about um, writing, telling our stories or writing, and I'm going to be using telling our stories and writing our stories simultaneously because they serve the same purpose, right? We can tell our stories in the verbal oral form or in written form. There are different ways in which we can tell our stories. So I'm going to be using telling our stories and writing our stories simultaneously because sometimes it's not everybody who will write a book that will become read by every other person. Sometimes it is the story, the testimony that we share of what we endured and how we were able to endure it and the lessons that we learned while we're going through it that will become of benefits for others. The important thing that I want us to note is that we do not waste our pain. We do not waste our painful experiences. And our stories, our pain will be in vain if it does not serve as a gain for others. That has been my life principle through my almost 33 decades of living with chronic affliction and everything else that came with it. One of the lessons that I learned along the way, and which I wanted the book Grace in the Storm to bring to people, is that it is never about us alone. And we will waste our pain if we do not transform it into something that is meaningful, something that can have eternal significance, something that can benefit others. We waste our pain if we don't transform it, and that's for me is a foundational truth when it comes to transforming pain, when it comes to healing from pain. And in this instance, I'm talking more about emotional pain, trauma, stresses, and all of that. Now, for me, writing was very therapeutic. I mean, in the writing of the book, it really helped me to be able to process my thoughts. It helped me to be able to, you know, um, put in a form that I can come back and review how exactly was I processing what I was experiencing in that season of my life. I lived 20 years plus with a chronic respiratory disease and a debilitating neuromuscular disease. I mean, I coughed nonstop every day for 20 years. And I knew it was a painful process. I mean, living each day, waiting for a turnaround, living each day, trusting God that the situation would change, living each day, going to the doctors and getting more and more bad reports. I had to find a way to keep hope alive. And I knew I could not afford to give up on a hope of a turnaround for good. And that was how writing became a part of what I was doing to help me to deal with those challenges. And it wasn't just only my health that was not only the area that I was facing challenges. The fact that I was facing a chronic health challenge was also affecting different areas of my life. It affected my professional career. It had impact on our finances. I mean, so many other areas of our lives were impacted. And so it was like a multitude of things were happening. And, it's just that there were fiery ordeals, right? But we all go through different ordeals, stories, trauma, and it can affect us mentally. It can affect our emotional well-being in different ways. Yours, I don't know what your own unique traumatic experience may have been, or painful experience have been, or your stressful condition, or what adversity that you are facing or you have faced in the time past. The truth of the matter is that it impacts us mentally, it impacts us emotionally. It can cause anxiety, it can cause depression, anger, guilt, shame, or even isolate. I mean, we know that trauma isolates. Painful experiences can isolate us. It makes you feel as if you're the only one in the whole world that is going through this, especially if you don't have anyone else to talk about. And for me, right now, we have what we call an amputee support group, right? Because I'm a bilateral amputee as a result of the health challenges that I had. I lost both legs. And having an amputee support group where people can come and share their own unique stories has been very helpful for a number of our beneficiaries. I mean, those in the group are not even necessarily beneficiaries of the Feet of Grace Foundation. They just want a place where somebody understands what they are experiencing. It's where they can come and say, this, I'm going through this, I'm feeling this way. Does any other person understand what I'm going through? And that is the importance of support groups, because there you share your story in a safe place, and you learn from others and others can learn from you. And so, in so doing, when we're dealing with such major events in our lives that can impact us emotionally, it can be very difficult to cope with it if we don't have a safe space where we can talk, where we can where we do not feel that we are alone in the whole world. And it is very hard to cope with the everyday challenges of living with an adversity, or with a traumatic experience. I mean, I have worked with clients, the things that happened in their past, traumatic experiences that they had in the past was still affecting them to the current moment. It was dictating their lives in the moment. And I will always say it, and those of you who have followed me long enough who have heard me say this, that it is too much power to give to something that happened to us in the past to continue to dictate our present and direct our future. That is a lot of power. And you and I can harness that power and transform it into something that is meaningful, something that is significant and positive. And it all starts from being able to heal from what happened to us, the trauma, the stress. And storytelling, or writing your story, are tools that we can use to find, to express ourselves. It also helps us to connect with others, and it can also be empowering. For me, I think the first time I shared my story of what I was going through. I've been sharing my testimonies in church, and maybe after a major hospital event, I come back and give thanks to God for bringing me out of it. But when I moved from Nigeria to Ghana, and I started going to because of course this is a new environment, and I had the opportunity to share my story, from end to end as at that time. And I think by then, 2001, I was 8 years into the story. And so it was like being able to share it from end to end, and you follow the sequence. And the two pastors of the church, the two of them who listened to me, came to me and said to me, Irene, you have a story to tell, and you must share the story. You need to write it. Oh, I said, oh, I have been writing a little bit of the things, the victories I'm experiencing along the way, and sharing it as an email with people just to encourage others. And I said, no, this needs to be properly written. So I had two witnesses. And then I had all that happened to me in Ghana, which worsened my health situation. And eventually I had to have a medical evacuation to Switzerland. And after going through all that process and you know, getting some stability in my health when I got to Switzerland, another lady had the opportunity to listen to my story end to end. And this time it was 10 years, because this was in 2003. And she said to me, Irene, you must write the book about your story. So this was the third witness that said, you need to write about what you are going through and how God is keeping you. Share with others. Let it be something that will bring hope and encouragement to other people. And indeed, that was the confirmation for me. I took it more serious. I was just actually sat down and, tried to put down as much details of what I could recall it, because I didn't know exactly how I was going to write the book. But the important thing was that several people have listened to my story, and they have been inspired by what I was going through, and the grace of God that was keeping me as I was going through it. Then I called it Empowered for Victory, because I strongly believe that there was going to be an end to what I was going through. I mean, I didn't even know at that time that it was going to span 20 long years. I didn't know that it was going to end in lungs transplant. I didn't know that it was going to end in bilateral leg amputation. But in the moment where I knew that what was happening to me was not just about me. I had that confirmation in my heart. I was very sure about it. And so the thing was, how was I going to tell it in a way that would be meaningful for others? But all I did was to continue journaling. But I'm going to come back to that later on, because there are the different ways in which we can tell our stories and write our stories. But for today, I want to emphasize more on the emotional healing that can be facilitated when we tell our stories and write our stories. And I like Meg mentioned earlier, for me, it was very therapeutic, being able to process what I was experiencing and identifying what was helping me to cope in the midst of the funniest experience that I was going through. It was very ordeal, being in and out of the hospital. I mean, hearing doctors' reports and prognosis going from bad to worse. And of course, understanding the fact that I also had a young family. I had two young children then, my husband, and how this was also impacting them. And my parents were alive, my parents-in-law were alive, how it was impacting them. So it wasn't my own personal story alone, right? So storytelling really is an art of sharing our personal experiences, our feelings, our insights with others in a meaningful and engaging way. And I want to emphasize that it has to be in a meaningful and an engaging way. Because sometimes the things that happen to us can be occasioned by the wrongful action of others. And yes, then there were a lot of that part of my own story. And there's some parts of that story that will never see the light of day, because it was more of a therapeutic release for me to write it. It was not meant to be seen by others, because bottom line is that in telling our story, we want to tell it in a meaningful and engaging way, not in a way that would throw others under the bus, or be used to vilify others. That is not the kind of storytelling I'm talking about. I'm talking about the storytelling that takes what happened to me and present it in a way that um, becomes an opportunity for others to learn, to gain from it, right? Not to destroy other people. Storytelling can be done in a solo activity. It can be done in a group or even in a community. I mean, like I started sharing my story in my church, and then from all the as I was moving from one country to another, I was sharing as God gives me the opportunity. Sometimes it's in a small group. Maybe I have just come out of a hospital and I share the testimony and then make reference to what I've been through in the past. And so it can be done in different ways. The important thing here is that, as you know, especially for those who are grieving, storytelling can, be very beneficial when you are grieving the loss. I remembered when my mother passed away. It caught us off guard. I mean, we did not want it. We fought against it. We tried to hold her back. We did everything that we could do to keep her with us. But God's will was done. She was called home. And it was very difficult for us, my brothers, my siblings, my sister, my brothers, and myself, losing our mother. And, at a time when we really wanted her to benefit from us. I mean, we're now getting established and we wanted to be able to take care of her. She had sacrificed so much for us. And one of the things that really helped us sharing our experiences of mom. My mom was a very strict teacher, and she was very strict at home. And I, being the first child, I mean, I got the full load of her strictness. But as we were writing her story, and everybody was sharing their own personal experience of mom. It was so, we actually ended up laughing at some of the things that mommy said, some of the things that she did. It was therapeutic for us, grieving together, the seven of us, and sharing our stories of mom, lessons we learned from mom. And I had put them together so that, I compiled them into a story that we actually shared with others when we celebrated her first memorial. Our plan was actually to make it into a book. But the point that I'm making here is that it benefits us in a way that it's healing. It suits the pain. We remember the good times we had together. Yes, we no longer have her with us, but it helped us to focus our attention on the good times that we have had together. And there are a number of ways in which we can write the number of ways in which writing our story can impact our health, especially the emotional aspect of it. Writing requires us to introspect. When you want to share your story, you're just not going to come out there and just talk everything. You're going to reflect. You're going to have moments of introspection. I mean, there was the first draft of Grace in the Storm. Um, there were several things that I had to take out at the end of the day because, I mean, I asked myself, what is the value added? How is this going to help people who are listening to it? And there's several books that I've worked on. Even when I was writing my mother's story, the first thing that I wanted to be sure is that I'm not presenting her as a victim. I mean, I'm not done with the story yet, but I mean, it's not a victim, as somebody victorious. And when I was writing my story, I did not want to be a victim. The purpose of writing my story was not to elicit pity. It was to inspire others that yes, life happens to us. Life happens to us, but we can overcome. And I know, and what will help us to overcome, and what lessons I was learning in the process. Because yes, life happened to me. I didn't ask for it, I didn't invite all the things that happened to me, but it did happen. So what next? Where do I go from there? And I didn't want what happened to me, the pain, the suffering, the grief of losing so many things. I mean, and the time of my life that I could literally say was consumed by this chronic affliction. For me, I didn't want it to just pass away like that and just, not amount to anything. It is a double tragedy for us to go through a painful experience and not bring anything out of it. And if we're going to heal from our traumatic experiences, we need to be able to introspect and say, okay, this happened to me. I acknowledge it. Where do I go from here? What are the lessons that I can bring out of here? How does this strengthen my faith? How does this strengthen my character? How does this experience refine me to be a better version of me? And so that degree of introspection is required, when we write our stories. But you see, the beauty of that is that it actually takes us on a journey of healing because you are able to reframe what happens to you. You're able to have a different perspective about it, a healthier perspective about it, and you refuse to be a victim because of what happened to you. And so, because you take time to look at and examine what you have gone through or what you may be going through, and you want to present it in a way that is meaningful, it helps you to understand the cause and effect to the degree that it is possible. How did this happen? How did this impact me? Where do we go from here? And of course, there is the part in which is there something else that could have been done better? So these are lessons that I'm going to learn from this for the future. And so, one other part of it is that as you're writing, you're releasing all those thoughts, all the things that could consume you. Let me share a personal experience here. I was um, I was a victim of calumny at a time in my life. Somebody who I trusted, respected, and held in high esteem said awful things to me. And it was very, very painful. And, it was like this person was stabbing me in the chest as they were talking, and how they manipulated the things that I had done and presented it, you know, to create a different picture. It was beyond words, and I was deeply, deeply wounded. I can't even tell you how many nights that I spent weeping. And as I was going through the season phase of my life, I knew I had to immediately take a retreat because, on top of everything else that I've gone through in my life, if there's any lesson that I've learned, I knew that I cannot hold grudges. I cannot allow myself to let resentment take root in my heart. And I knew that I cannot give room for resentment or for a vengeful spirit to take hold. And so what I did was to take time out. I left home and went away somewhere. I really wanted to process what happened. How did we get here? That somebody that I trusted and held in such high esteem could turn against me in such a vengeful and vicious way. What was my part? And so it was a lot of retrospecting, introspecting for me. But the other part of it was that I just sat down because there was a lot of built of emotion. I was pained, so I started writing. And by the grace of God, I'm a very descriptive and graphic writer. I can paint the picture. And I knew that in painting that picture, just to let it out, it was just to let it out. And at the end of the writing, I read it. So I spent a few days journaling and just writing out my thoughts, how I was feeling, and how this was affecting me. Just, writing it out, and at the same time praying and asking God to help me to handle this situation, to give me insight. I mean, where exactly did this go wrong? The bottom line here, at the end of the day, is that that story is never going to get published anywhere. It's never going to be read by any other person under the surface of the earth. But I was, I had a relief. It was a lot of pent up and emotion went out of me when I read it. And as I reread it, I mean, I was like, well, thank you, Lord. Hitherto, the Lord has been my Ebenezer. This has happened. I'm going to learn lessons from this. And I, deliberately looked for lessons to learn from it, and also made up my mind I was going to forgive the person. It doesn't matter whether they ask for forgiveness or not. It doesn't matter whether they recognized what they have done wrong. Forgiveness is about me, first and foremost. It's not about them. I didn't want anything that was going to hinder my relationship with God. But how did I get to this point? It was being able to express all those emotions that could have festered and become negative. And it was very healing for me. And so, when we want to write our stories, we need to allow the grace of God to suffuse what we are doing. We need to allow the grace of God to saturate us, because our intention must never be to get even with the person who have hurt us. It must never be to pull down the person who has caused us the pain, or whatever the situation, that has led to that. Our intention may always be, what can we learn from this, and what can others learn from this, and how can we heal, embark on our a journey of emotional healing as we share our stories and as we write it. Another part of this is that we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and honest. I mean, you can't heal if you're not going to be honest with your feelings, with yourself. You need to be able to be authentic. You need to be able to um, open up yourself. And that's why we need to be careful where we are sharing our stories, right? I always recommend that find a safe place. Start with one trusted person. I mean, this thing happened to you, and it can isolate you. It can make you view life differently if you do not process it. And part of processing what happened to you is finding a safe place, a safe person, a trusted person that you can share the story with. And it could be a therapist, it could be a trauma transformational coach, someone like me. I mean, just find a safe place to take that first step. And once the story is told, was as you are sharing the story, especially if you're doing it with somebody who has been trained to help you manage the narrative, it helps you to begin the journey of processing what happened to you and healing from it. You see, if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in our writing when we eventually choose to make it public, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and authentic, we will see that other people will locate themselves in our stories, because we're all humans. We all go through stuff. And it now becomes beneficial for others. When you read the Psalms and you study the way David expresses himself when he's going through some challenging stuff in his life, you will see that David is very honest, very authentic, and quite vulnerable, and sometimes extremely graphic in describing his experiences. And the joy of that for us today is that many of us can relate with David in his pain, even if what we happen to us is not exactly the same. And it is the same thing for us today. Even when our life experiences are different, when we allow ourselves to be authentic, to be vulnerable, others will locate themselves in our story. When our writing, writing that is especially those ones that focuses on exploring traumatic experiences, because it's like I did say earlier, it is a tool for emotional healing, trauma healing. When our writing is focused on exploring what happened to us at the emotional level and how we can transform what happened to us, it can also promote our physical healing. Because, man, when we are wounded in the soul, wounded in our heart, it has a way of affecting us physically as well. And so, as we write to heal from the inside, it can also impact us physically. People have actually researched, psychologists have researched and shown that writing our stories can help us to heal the wounds in our heart. It can boost our immune system and actually decrease some symptoms of some chronic diseases. And so, I mean, I can you know say that that is true in my own experience, because in writing Grace in the Storms, it was a therapeutic experience for me. And I have this book has been out since I think it was 2017 that it came out. After 13 years of writing, I still pick the book and read it, and some of the things that I read there actually amazes me myself. And I'm asking myself, did I really write this? I it was the writing that I was doing that eventually became Grace in the Storms. It was like writing about my experiences of the severe storms that I was going through in my life. I mean, and they were really severe because they lasted over 2 decades. And it became an essential part of my healing process, dealing with both physical debilitation of my afflictions, of the sicknesses, and the emotional impact of it. It um, um it's for me, being able to write about all that experience made it count for something, and that was very healing for me. I knew my pain was not in vain, was not wasted, and I simply refused to waste my pain. And you see, what I was learning, what was becoming clearer for me at every stage of that experience became, life was throwing stuff at me, and I had to learn how to dodge and navigate them. And then coming back to um, document it as I was going through, it gives me the opportunity to reflect on what happened, how God helped me, and what it required of me to be able to stay on. I mean, keep hope alive. And the interesting part of this was that as the years were progressing from 10 years to 12 years to 15 years, every time I had a major episode, I remember one in particular. I was literally rolling on the floor in my bedroom in excruciatingly agonizing pain. It was like an out of body experience for me, where I was that day. And as I was in that space, curled up on the floor, I couldn't lie on my bed. I was not comfortable. I couldn't sit down. I was not comfortable. All I could do was coil up on the floor. And I just had a moment of reflection in that space. I was curled up on the floor. And what came to my spirit was, Irene, how are you going to write this portion of your story? How are you going to write this portion of your story? Rolling on the floor in pain. Yeah, I was in pain. And I will write it just like this. And I will write also how this pain ended. And so it was like I was having a conversation with myself in that space, that I will also write how it ended. Because I know that there is only so long this pain can go on for. It has to come to an end. And when it comes to an end, I will tell the story of how this pain came to an end and how I felt at the end of it. But what that did to me, that moment, was that I began to look beyond the moment, that pain that I was in. It was no longer the focus of my attention because it was really, consuming me. And all I could think was that this thing needs to stop. It needs to stop. And this thing needs to stop right now. To You will eventually stop. And I'm going to write about this. So it just translated me from that spot on that floor to begin to see what is possible beyond that moment. And you see, when we now have that mindset, when we're going through challenges, it's no longer about what we're experiencing in the moment. It now becomes what we can transform this to, what this is going to add up to ultimately. And that really helped me as I was going on and the situation was going from bad to worse with my health. Having the perspective that I'm going to receive comfort in this situation. This one will also have to come to an end. And when it does, I'm going to write about it. So let me read to you the preface of Grace in the Storms, just to give you a perspective of where I was with writing about the storms. And I'll just read briefly a part of it, and maybe it will inspire someone who is listening to me today. Preface. This is Grace in the Storms, a living proof. Storms pay us unexpected visits. Often they come with stunning ferocity that leave us not only aghast, but with a question: where is God in this? I have had a sizable share of storms. Sometimes they lined up like incoming airplanes of different sizes flying over my house on their way to the Geneva airport. Through each storm, I came to know the one who gives peace in the midst of storm deeper than I knew him before the storm. I came to the one, I came to know the one who stills the storms with a command, and that's all it takes. There was a time that the forceful gale of the swirling storms stole my peace and joy. Soon I found that if firmly rooted on the solid rock, the winds may billow, waves may rage, I may be swayed, but I will never be uprooted from God's loving hands that holds me close to his bosom and his mighty hands which always keeps me safe. My story journals the swiftness with which life can move from calmness to chaos, the transverse from the fullness of life and strength that once jogged the perimeter of University College Hospital in Ibadan to the extreme that required support and supplemental oxygen, even to take a few steps. It moved from the freedom of being a frequent traveler to the restraining embargo of no travel, from an overloaded work schedule to a snow white agenda, and from the exciting life of outdoor adventures to staring at the trees changing from luscious green to gray twigs through the windows of my bedroom. Through these extremes of life, hope was the only fuel that energized me each day and gave me the reason to hold on. I am thankful to God that the story did not end with the storms, and that is the joy that we have. There is always something beyond our stories. The story did not end with a storm. My story echoes the 126th Psalm of David. When the Lord turned our captivity, the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dreamt. Then was our mouth filled with laughter and our tongue with singing. Then they among the heathen said, the Lord has done great things for them. It is a story of amazing recovery, restoration, and turnaround for good. God turned it all around and made me a living testimony of his faithfulness and amazing grace. You will read in this book testimonies of relentless determination to never give up on hope. In the midst of the fierce times, God is not done with writing the story of my life. He is still revealing it as he deems fit and as it fits his agenda and plan for me. I believe it only will end when Jesus returns or calls me to his glory. So I'm holding on, grateful for how far he has brought me, and expectant that his hands will continue to uphold me. More than this, though, is the challenge that you should never give up on hope, no matter what your own peculiar storms look like. You never give up on hope, no matter what your own peculiar storm looks like. Because at the end of the day, writing our stories, telling our stories, help us to construct meaning from the devastating events that happen to us. Writing Chris in the Stock helped me to make meaning. And that is what telling our story is all about. Telling our own unique story in our own unique way. It will help you to construct a meaning from the devastating adversity that happened to you, from the traumatic experience that you have gone through. It helps us to repair the disruption that has been caused for me by chronic illnesses. For you, it could be any kind of storm, whatever your storm may have been. Writing or telling your story will help you to repair the disruption that was caused by your circumstances. It can also empower you to move on with your life. When you are able to lay it down and heal from what happened to you, it empowers you to move forward. Ultimately, what we believe and we share in this group is that there is purpose beyond our pain. There is a hope of a life of positivities, a life that is possible beyond our painful experiences. And writing can help us to do that. Writing can help you to keep your thoughts on track. Because when we're going through life challenges, our thoughts can go in different directions. And more often than not, it is never in a positive direction except we rein it in. Our thoughts tend to always go in the path of worst case scenario. But when you are able to pause to write or tell what you're experiencing, it gives you an opportunity to examine where your thoughts are going and to rein them in rather than just looping around the same distressing emotions and asking the same questions over and over and over again. Therapeutic writing, therapeutic storytelling helps us to capture these thoughts, analyze them. Storytelling can help you to cope with trauma and stress by providing all several benefits. And I will share a couple of them, and we will close it for tonight and continue next week, third Tuesday, as we continue on this subject. Your story matters. Your story is unique. Let me share one of the ways The story, telling your story and writing your story can contribute to helping you emotionally. It will help you to process and release your emotions instead of bottling them up or avoiding them. When life happens to us, we want to bury it under the carpet. But when we actually talk about it in a safe place, or we pour it out in our writings, we're able to look at them, examine them, process them, and acknowledge that, yeah, this happened to me. It happened to me. Yeah, it did. Well, where do we go from here? And you can be able to process it. You acknowledge what happened to you. You acknowledge how it's affecting you. You acknowledge how you feel about it. And by so doing, you reduce the intensity and the impact of the negative emotions because you are able to look at what happened with clarity. You can see where the fear is. You can see where the sadness is. You can see where the anger is. And you can ask yourself, what do you want to do with this? And that's why writing is very good. Storytelling is very good for emotional healing. It will help you to reframe your perspectives and find meaning in your experience. And one other thing it would do, it will help you to find your strengths. What are your values? What are the lessons that you have learned? And as you do that, you see where you have exhibited strength in your character. It boosts your sense of self worth, it boosts your sense of purpose, and ultimately, it gives you a hope of a future beyond what happened to you. My dear friends, no one can tell your story like you do, and your story is unique to you. Your story matters. And in the process of transforming our painful experiences to power, to purpose, and to profit, we would need to get to that space where we acknowledge what happened to us, process it, and embark on a healing journey. And that is where the transformation becomes really full. If you have read Grace in the Storms, I want to encourage you to share with me what lessons you learned from it and what questions you have from it. On the last Tuesday of August, we're going to answer the questions or address whatever question that you have from it. My dear friends, whatever your own unique experience may be, let it be a preface to the story of the book of your life, not the final chapter. Whatever the traumatic experience that you have experienced may be, let it be a preface, just like I read the preface from this book. There's so much more after the preface. And that is the lesson that I want you to take from here. There is so much more after the preface. There is so much more to your life beyond your painful experience, beyond your traumatic experience. And telling that story helps you to be able to begin to see a future beyond the pain. So we continue next week, Tuesday, by God's grace. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight. And as I mentioned, if you have any comments, please feel free to write it in the comments. If you have any questions, please feel free to share it either by DM or to write it in the comments. Ultimately, my encouragement to you is don't waste your pain. Don't waste that experience. Tell the story so that others can benefit from it. Our pains will be in vain if it does not serve as a gain for others. And you don't need to do this journey alone. If you need help in this process, please feel free to reach out. My name is Irene Titilola Ulumese. I'm a trauma and transformational coach. I help people transform their pain to power, to purpose, and to profit. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Good night and God bless you. Bye for now.